Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gaura Premanande, Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai, Shri Harinam Mantra Ki Jai, Shri Harinam Prabhu Ki Jai, Go Premanande, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Om Agnanatimirandasya Gnanyanjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Dena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manopishtam Stapitham Nena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadahmayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Uta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakanvitam Scha. He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripasindubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Go Premanande Hari Hari Bom. So it's with somewhat of a heavy heart today after news of the passing away of my godbrother. It was a great treasure of the Krishna consciousness movement, Madhudwish Prabhu. I felt some satisfaction, however, because somehow Krishna gave me the prompting within my heart to contact him before I went to Los Angeles last week, and I flew in and then I went to meet him at his room. And he required quite a bit of strength just to talk, so he got himself ready before I got there. And we spent about an hour and a half. I didn't want to tire him out too much because his main objective at that point was to save all his energy. He had had a mini stroke. His health was going down anyway, and then he had a mini stroke several weeks ago, I think. And then he said he lost all his strength. It was hard for him to function. He had given a class last week. It really exhausted him just to give one class. So he was saving all his energy for the Ratha Yatra, because Madhudvish was at the first Ratha Yatra in San Francisco. And Prabhupada named him the Emperor of Kirtan. He was such a swashbuckler. He was so strong and vibrant and a non-envious person. This is the one quality that comes into my mind with Madhudvish. He was non-envious. And he was a great leader, very intelligent. So he helped start the Krishna consciousness movement in San Francisco. And around 1972, he went to Australia. And Australia was struggling at the time. But under his guidance and under his leadership, it flourished. It became so productive. And one of the things he was telling me, I actually interviewed him, I taped it even. He'll thank me for it later. Was that when he got to Australia, he united everybody with he didn't want any of this huge competition between all the different temples, and he wanted it to be everyone working together as one unit. So that's one of the things that he did that really got Australia on track. He told me he got 108 personal letters from Prabhupada. 108. That's how much he was engaged in the management. And when there was difficulties, Madhudvish was one of the men that Prabhupada completely depended on. So early on, when he was just a young man, he had so much responsibility as a GBC and a big manager and everything like that, a leader of the movement. He took all that on his shoulders. But the one thing, as I say, that I noticed about him, he's non-envious. When I was with him just last Thursday, it was kind of an interview. I was asking him very specific questions. Partly it was a good excuse to go see him, to interview him for my book, and the other one was just that I missed Keshava. Keshava passed away before I could go see him. And so I said, I don't want to let this happen again. And I'm starting to realize also the great importance of taking advantage of association while you can, because don't assume that it will be there tomorrow. In fact, even Tamal Krishna Maharaj's family, his brother and his brother's wife just got initiated recently, but they were very close with their brother Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and their whole family was very close and everything. And he just died suddenly because he died in an auto accident in Mayapur. But they said that after that, whenever somebody's leaving the house, they always tell them how much they love each other before they leave, because they always have this feeling that may be the last time. There's a way in Maya makes you think, oh, this is a permanent world I live in here, but it's not. And with Vaishnavas, their association is so elevating, and especially ones that have dedicated their whole lives and have been around for a long, long time. If you can have some association with them, then you can gain a lifetime's worth of experience in a short amount of time. When I was talking to Madhudvish Prabhu on Thursday, in every aspect of what he was telling me, he was always glorifying some other devotee, telling me what a great devotee Charu was, and that then he was glorifying Rameshwar as the one who really got book distribution going, and then Buddhimanta. These are all great personalities. Rameshwar, of course, is still here. Charu is still here. Buddhimanta passed away many years ago, but he was one of the devotees who really started the book distribution revolution in the world. And Rameshwar was the brains behind getting that revolution started, because he also didn't, as Madhudwish was saying, didn't think in provincial terms. He thought in universal terms of how to get the whole thing going everywhere. He wasn't just trying to keep it all within Los Angeles or wherever he happened to be stationed at the time, but he wanted to please Prabhupada and see book distribution expand. So he sent Buddhimanta out to various places like Australia, where he really got the devotees going. So I noticed this about Madhudwish, and I've always noticed about him. Over time, there's so many things. One can attach oneself to some cause and then become acrimonious about it. But he never did that. I always noticed that he was not outspoken when it came to these intractable kinds of issues that seem to vex so many people and that they become hung up on. But he was genuinely attached to Prabhupada and the devotees. I remember one time at one of the Prabhupada festivals in Los Angeles, annual festival, Madhudwish used to be the MC for that. And he made a statement that is indicative of his kind of vision, but he said that, I'm forgetting the name of the devotee. Who's the hardest working devotee in Los Angeles? Huh? Ratnabhushan. So he said, any of you, he was glorifying Jayananda, who is a historic figure in the Krishna consciousness movement, who passed away in 1977. But he was saying, any of you who didn't get to meet Jayananda, you should go spend some time with Ratnabhushan, because then you'll see kind of what he was like. And I could tell from the way he was looking at the devotees and just appreciating their qualities. And I felt that when I interviewed him last Thursday, how he was appreciating the qualities of all the devotees very deeply. And he was very encouraging to me as well. And when someone is non-envious, they can give their whole heart in encouraging you. And so he saved up all his energy, and I was out at the Rath Yatra parade on Sunday, and sort of moving back and forth to watch how the book distribution was going. And then I was noticing who was leading kirtans in front of the various Rath Yatra carts. And Vatsala, who was a very vibrant kirtan leader, was leading in front of Subhadra Devi's cart. And then I went away a little further back, and then I came back, and I heard some other kirtan leader singing. It sounded really funny to me because I couldn't recognize the voice at all. At first it sounded sort of childlike, and then it sounded also a little like soft for who you'd want to put into kirtan. And my first reaction was, who put that person in? Why do they have a kid singing that can't sing that well or something, or can't sing that loudly? And then as I got closer, I saw there was a very intense crowd around the kirtan leader. And I thought, yeah, it's a kid, because they're all looking down. And then when I got closer, I realized it was Madhudwish, and he was in his wheelchair. And with all his strength, and I knew he didn't have much, because when I talked to him, it was draining for him just to talk to me. He was leaning down with the microphone on his wheelchair, just giving his whole strength, everything he could give just to sing out the Mahamantra. And his caregiver had said that that was his main focus, to be at that Rath Yatra, to sing in that last kirtan. And after he did that, then he came back and prepared to give up his body, which he did last night at 11:15 p.m. So it's always the hardest event to tolerate is when losing a god brother, a god sister, any of the great devotees of the Sankirtan movement. He is iconic in ISKCON history as being one of the pioneers, and not just a pioneer, but somebody who was brilliant and strong and very beloved of Srila Prabhupada. So we will remember him and take inspiration from his life and how he lived it, giving his full energy to spreading the Krishna consciousness movement, to appreciating devotees, and how he used his last breath to sing in the kirtan. Madhudvish Prabhu ki. And last night we were reading from the Krishna Book, which has just become so nectarian, hasn't it? Just reading these stories written by Srila Vyasadeva about Krishna, and then put into this like pudding form by Srila Prabhupada. It's like, I know it's Ekadashi, but it's all nectar, just like Drava Samyutam. It says in the Bhagavatam that the Bhagavatam is this semi-solid nectar, and you don't have to chew it. It's a smoothie. You just like, and I don't know if, if the Krishna Book, that's like the pudding of the pudding. So you can just drink it down practically, and it's intoxicating. It cures all the ills of material life. The bhava rog. The bhava rog means this terrible disease which compels me to again and again take poison, to do things that are not good for me. The envious spirit that creeps in that makes me stubborn and not want to surrender to Krishna. Just by hearing the pastimes of Krishna, I become readjusted to my real nature, which is to be a servant and lover of Krishna in such a beautiful way. It attracts the mind naturally. It's the only way to actually ultimately control the senses, is to have some appreciation for these pastimes and the variety of the descriptions and the variety of the spiritual world, the activities of Krishna. So last night we heard several chapters, but one of them really stuck in my mind, the descriptions of autumn, and particularly the last paragraph. I had noted it before in the Light of the Bhagavat, which is kind of a repackaging of this chapter, which Prabhupada wrote for Japan, for a seminar, a conference that was to be held, which was called the Cultivation of the Human Spirit. And Prabhupada was sitting in Vrindavan before he had come to America, writing his Bhagavatam commentary, getting ready to come to America, and he was invited by the Japanese government to come and present something about Hinduism and to contribute to this seminar, the cultivation of the human spirit. And so he wrote this book in preparation to take it there, a separate book called Light of the Bhagavat, which is a summary of the chapter. And of course, if you read all the letters Prabhupada wrote around that time, he was trying to get some kind of funding to go there, and he couldn't get it. Everyone turned a deaf ear to Prabhupada at that time. There were just a few people helped him out here and there, but they didn't consider what he was doing to be important or even significant. They just thought, and they're busy doing whatever they were doing, so they didn't help him. So he couldn't go, but that book remained, actually, and Prabhupada never published it, but posthumously it was published by Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and illustrated by a famous Chinese artist who did it sort of in the style, a little bit of a Chinese style. And in that book, there's a section that always attracted me, in which it describes how practitioners, gyanis, yogis, and bhaktas, they can't realize the full import of what they're doing in this life until they leave their body. Because although the human body is intelligent and it's rare and it's built for understanding God and inquiring about God. That's specifically what it's built for. Of course, it can go the other way too. There's facility for some sense gratification, although I must admit the pain that can be experienced by the body is far more than any kind of sense gratification you can get in the material world. But it says there that it describes how during Chaturmasya, the devotees and students and everybody else, they sit down and they practice intensely. And then after the rainy season over, they get up and they go back out again, because you really can't travel during the rainy season or go anywhere because the roads are all muddy and, it's just not happening. But after that, they get up and they go out, and that's when they realize the results of their sacrifice. Sometimes you can't tell when you're right in the middle of it. But when you go back out into the world, that's when it becomes apparent. So then Prabhupada turns that into, then this lifetime we're in is a Chaturmasya-like existence. And all the austerities and the disciplines and the endeavors we're making in this lifetime, we will realize fully when we leave the body. So that's very encouraging, isn't it? Yeah. And so in the Gita, Krishna says, Shaknoti taivaya shodhum praksharira vimokshanat kama krodod vavam vegam sayukta sa sukhi naraha. This is from the 5th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Shaknoti taiva. So Shaknoti means the ability to do something. Shaknoti taivaya shodhum. We can look at it. Praksharira. So prak means before, and sharira means the body. Praksharira, vimokshana means to give up, to be liberated from this body. So before, Krishna is saying, you're released from this present body. If you develop the ability, shaknoti haiva yashodhum, to kama krodod bhavam vegam. No, I mean, we could look at it on the screen, right? That's what I meant. Kama krodod bhavam vegam sa yukta sa sukhinara. So sukhinara means a happy human. You become a sukhinara. And if you're able to, kama krodod bhavam vegam, if you're able to tolerate the urges of kama and kroda. 23. There it is. Proof positive that we're not making stuff up. And Prabhupada always, even Prabhupada, he knew all the verses, but when he was sitting in the room with the people and he was teaching Bhagavad Gita, he would say, find out that verse. And he'd have somebody grab it and bring it, because it's like in a court of a law. It's like, where is it in the law book? You want to see it. This is our process. In fact, I heard Prabhupada saying this morning, somebody was complaining about one of the things Prabhupada was saying. And Prabhupada was saying, I'm not saying. Krishna is saying. I'm not saying. Krishna is saying. I'm just repeating. You got a problem? Talk to Krishna about it. So, Shaknoti haiva yashodhum praksharira vimokshana. This is a very important verse. So, what Krishna is saying here, if you can scroll down just a tad. I want to see both at the same time if possible. Okay. Shaknoti, the ability, is able, if somebody's able. Iha eva, in the present body. So iha means here, now, in this time, in this world. Iha eva. If you're able in this present body, yashodhum, to tolerate praksharira vimokshana, before you give up this body. Kama means desire. Krodha means anger. Udbhavam, generated from vegam, urges. So there are all these urges, and we can name them from the first verse in the Upadeshamrita. Vacho vegam, manasakrodha vegam, jihva vegam, udaropasta vegam, hitan vegam yo vishaheta tira, sarvamapi mam pritivim sashishyat. So he names vacho vegam as the first one, the urge to speak. And manasakrodha vegam, then the demands of the mind, which are in the thousands and tens and hundreds of thousands every day, the demands of the mind. Jihva means the tongue. The tongue wants something, always more, even though it doesn't need it. Udarapasta, the belly, the genitals, they have their very strong demands. Itan vegam yo vishaheta dira. If one is able to be adhira, not adhira, to be dhira, means that to tolerate these urges without just reacting to them, then one becomes a real teacher. Then one can teach others. One can actually help others. If you're subjected to these things yourself, then what can you teach? So in this verse, Shaknoti Havyashodhum, Krishna is saying that before you give up this present body in this lifetime, you should develop this ability to tolerate the urges of kama and krodha, udbhavam vegam, all these different urges that are generated from the connection of the body to the modes of material nature. And we'll look at that just for a second, the modes of material nature. We were just at Google, actually, before we came here. And we were teaching a class about the 3 modes of material nature. And I was given a very nice mantra to present to the class about the 3 modes of material nature, which summarizes their effect. And so the mode of goodness is proactive and satisfying. The mode of passion is restlessness and reactive. It's restless and reactive. And the mode of ignorance is helpless and inactive. So we have helpless and inactive for the mode of ignorance, restless and reactive for the mode of passion, and proactive and satisfied. Proactive and satisfied or happy for the mode of goodness. So if one, according to that definition, is affected by the mode of passion, what would be one's response to the different urges of the senses, according to that definition of the mode of passion? Well, reactive means they come and you just react to them. I don't even think about it, right? So there's a way in which one has to purify the senses. They have to be purified, and if somebody's in the mode of goodness, when these urges come to that person, he or she can be proactive and be able to appropriately react to them, or not react, as the case may be. So this requires the skill, or as we say, the muscle of tolerance. And tolerance means that, well, it means a lot of things, and we'll look at some of them because Prabhupada defines them in the Bhagavad Gita. So let's look at a couple of those definitions. Can you do that, Ramananda? Tolerance in the Bhagavad Gita, yeah. Tolerance means Veda search. So look it up first in your dictionary, somebody, please. Oh yeah, and there's always the book. You can always look at the index, the old-fashioned way, right? Okay, go ahead. 2.40. 2.14. Well, this is a famous verse about tolerance. In this verse, 2:14, Krishna says, O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons, They arise from sense perception, O scion of Bharata, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. Purport. In the proper discharge of duty, one has to learn to tolerate non-permanent appearances and disappearances of happiness and distress. According to Vedic injunction, one has to take his bath early in the morning, even during the month of Magh, January, February. It is very cold at that time, but in spite of that, a man who abides by the religious principles does not hesitate to take his bath. So what did you hear so far? As a means to overcome, to tolerate the extremes in the material world. First of all, what are some of the extremes that you have to tolerate that Krishna is mentioning? Which? Honor and dishonor. Okay, and what about in this verse? Happiness and distress. Heat and cold is really all pervasive. It's really hard to get comfortable here in this world. And I noticed this a little while back, how you can, a theory, Vaisesika's theory of how you can never get comfortable, this proves it. And that is, I noticed that wherever I go, any environment I'm in, I can't get the right temperature because, for instance, if I get in somebody's car and it's cold outside, I'm wearing a sweater and the heat's on, so it's too hot. So I take off my sweater and immediately the driver turns the heat down. And then I start getting cold again. So then a few minutes later, I put my sweater back on as quietly as possible. But then he turns the heat back up again. And I noticed that it happens in cars, it happens in houses, and wherever I go, someone will notice across the room, and then you can't even communicate to them. That you just you put a shutter on or something like that, they'll change the heat, and then you got to take it off and turn it back on. That's kind of how the material world goes. And the body's always trying to adjust, to the temperature outside. So heat and cold are extremes that come to us wherever we go. We walk around in this particular environment. So Prabhupada mentioned something in the purport so far about what is the reason some person, what is the foundational reason that a person is able to tolerate? Duty. And I'm looking at the word principle especially. And I just heard something in our Google class that really struck me, and I wrote it down. I hope I did. About act according to value and principles to rise above passion. Who said that? Did you say that when we were just at Google? In your group. Yeah, if you act according to principles. So the point is that you have to have a steady principle to follow. You can't keep changing according to what the weather changed, you try to change. Of course, to some degree, we try to regulate the temperature of our bodies and so forth so we don't get hypothermia or die of exposure one way or the other. But the point is that in any kind of change that goes on in the material world, you have to have a guiding principle and you have to have a duty to perform. I mean, the principle is do your duty no matter what, and you go on with your duty. And that helps to fix the mind because there will be various changes that take place that are inconvenient. Nonetheless, this principle of tolerance means that you go on doing your duty. So it's helpful to know what your duty is, and then as these changes come, to continue your duty despite whatever's happening externally. So he gives the example here of taking a bath. This is one of the principles of cultivating a sattvic life and spiritual life in general, is one should be clean. And so the person who has that principle as a guiding point doesn't compromise that in different environments. It may be cold, it may be hot, whatever, still takes the bath. So, continuing with the purport, similarly, a woman does not hesitate to cook in the kitchen in the months of May and June, the hottest part of the summer. Season. One has to execute his duty in spite of climatic inconveniences. Similarly, to fight is the religious principle of the Kshatriyas, and although one has to fight with some friend or relative, one should not deviate from his prescribed duty. One has to follow the prescribed rules and regulations of religious principles in order to rise up to the platform of knowledge, because by knowledge and devotion only can one liberate himself from the clutches of Maya, illusion. The two different names of address given to Arjuna are also significant. To address him as Kaunteya signifies his great blood relations from his mother's side, and to address him as Bharata signifies his greatness from his father's side. From both sides, he is supposed to have a great heritage. A great heritage brings responsibility in the matter of proper discharge of duties. Therefore, he cannot avoid fighting. So let's have a few reflections so far about what we've heard about tolerance. Sundarananda Prabhu.
Just to repeat the same point, Prabhu, to rise above not doing what you feel, but according to the principles.
Thank you for reiterating that point. It's very important. Shraddha?
Maharaj, you had mentioned about udaropasthvegams and the urges of the stomach, hunger, how it can be so strong. And I was just admiring how Dhruv Maharaj, as such a small boy, had tolerated so much that he was not eating. He was eating berries and later on just water and later on just breathing. So that's so admirable. And how much of control he displayed there at that time.
Yes, very determined, and he had a goal in mind. Yes.
I was just reading about Mother Disa Prabhu this morning. I was just thinking about tolerance, how all the initial Prabhupada disciples were so young. And it's in the youth, like people like to do so many things, but they tolerated all the urges and they just gave themselves to Prabhupada. And when we see them in our movement, we feel like they are emblem of tolerance, like who sustained and carried on with the movement. So that was a real inspiring story, and it really melted my heart.
Well, that's a good point, because just to maintain one's spiritual practice throughout a lifetime over various decades, there are things that one must tolerate. What are some of those things? For instance, besides just cold and heat, in order to go on doing one's duty, to perform your service in Krishna consciousness, what are some of the things that you have to tolerate? Yes. He's quoting the verse from the... I'm repeating because you don't have a microphone and it's being broadcast, so somebody should pass you a microphone.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. It's actually the verse from Bhagavatam where it says, it's basically Vacha Vegam, Manasa Vegam, Udara Vegam, and it goes to genitals. So, but everything has to be tolerated through mind. And as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Uddharer Atmanam avasadhyet, Atmana Viratmana Bandhu, Atmana Ripratmanaha, which is like, mind is the best enemy, and mind is best friend if it is controlled, and if it's not controlled, it's the fiercest enemy. And that's what Prahlad Maharaj confirmed. So the only thing to be tolerated is the urges of the mind.
Okay, Prahlad Maharaj said, ultimately, the only enemy you have in this world is the uncontrolled mind and senses. However, it may appear during our services that there are external forces coming to us. What are some of those? Somebody like Madhudwish Prabhu, as you mentioned would have to tolerate throughout a lifetime of service. Yes, Vital Prabhu. Sundar is ready too. I see him smiling. He's got something.
So much of, he might have faced so much ridicule by the so-called people who thought that they were normal and he was not.
So you join the Krishna consciousness movement and all your friends and relatives might say that you're crazy or something like that? Has that happened? Yes? Krishna Prana,
Feeling is
you wanna
mutual
say?
though.
That happened to you? You want to say anything about it? Okay. It happens. I mean, a lot of, I know, I used to think it was just Westerners. I was naive in thinking that, you know, we had this whole situation in the late, well, maybe in the mid-70s, yeah, because it was going on when Prabhupada was here, with families who were so disturbed that their children had become devotees that they hired these thugs to kidnap them off the streets. And then they would take them to a house somewhere, a safe house, and they would, you know, they would try to brainwash them into giving up Krishna consciousness. Very few of them ever did. They would escape, or they would say, okay, yeah, I hate Krishna, and then they'd run away. Somehow or other and come back to the movement. And there's still many devotees around who will raise their hand and say, oh yeah, they tried that on me, and so forth. And then I thought, you know, that could never happen to Indians because they're from the land of Krishna and so forth. But then I hear stories all the time, even more insidious sometimes, family sort of trying to dissuade people. But even in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Raghunath Das Goswami, who saw Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and wanted to become a devotee, and his family, who were very pious and wealthy and so forth, they like, that's going a little too far, you know. Those guys are just, they thought it was a little too much. Stay and be normal and just be with the family. And you can do a little Krishna consciousness, you know, that's fine. Isn't that a mantra? Is it? What other things you have to tolerate? Yes, Rajesh.
We have to also tolerate their criticism about, Krishna consciousness. So, because they may not be on board and they might be using, degraded comments which you may not like it, but since you live with them, you're part of it, so you have to tolerate that as well.
Yeah, it's very difficult when family members, they'll say derogatory things. It makes it tough. Yeah. Oh, sorry, Paul. Okay, go ahead, Paul Krishna.
So, some of the greatest challenges is to tolerate your own envy of other devotees and to also tolerate the pride.
Oh, that's such a good point.
That you get after doing any service.
Tolerate envy. So there's a way in which I'm envious of others. Envy means the inability to tolerate the eminence of another. Someone else is looking good and I feel really bugs me, like. But if one can learn to tolerate that, overcome that unreasonable feeling. Why is it that somebody else can't shine? Why is it I can't allow someone else to be preeminent and excel in so many things? And then pride, to tolerate pride. So it's an interesting concept to be able to tolerate these things. As I'm going through Krishna consciousness, otherwise the inability to tolerate that may cause me to become very offensive, right? Yeah, nice points. Very nice. Paul?
In our lifetime, sometimes we need to tolerate the scenarios where your close friend leaves the Krishna consciousness. That's a tolerance, and carry out the difficult situations, like you have ample association and times you don't have any association.
Friend leaves Krishna consciousness, like somebody very close to you changes their faith. They lose their faith, they lose their way, and they go away, and then that can be very disturbing, right? And somehow or other you have to tolerate that and keep going. And what was the other thing you said?
Sometimes we get a lot of association, but times some situation comes that you don't have any association, but we need to continue in the situation.
Yeah, I see sometimes temples, they'll have a festival and everyone goes there and they say, wow, this is a really vibrant place. And then I talk to the devotees who are residents, and they say, yeah, wait till, Tuesday comes. There's like 2 of us here, and it's like very difficult. But you have to go on and do your duty. You have to somehow be anchored in that. Yes. And just after.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. This is following up on what Balmukunda Prabhu said, but tolerating self-doubts when they arise due to conflicting opinions. You face a lot of criticism, which was earlier explained, and that also results into a conflict inwards, is what I'm doing, is if I'm doing right or wrong, and is this the way? And you still keep your head down and plow through and keep the faith in the Shastras and the Guru, and try to take as much as
Keep your head down and plow through. That's a good description of tolerance. To plow through. You're in a field and you got a long way to go, so you plow through. Okay, Shraddha and then Dayanidhi Prabhu. And meanwhile, we have our pundit in the front row looking up more definitions from Prabhupada's books about tolerance, right? Look in his purports also.
So we have Pratibha Mataji from Sacramento, and she's talking about toleration of temptation, tolerance of hunger and sleep.
Tolerance of temptation, tolerance of?
Hunger and sleep.
Hunger and sleep. Formidable enemies, huh?
Very basic.
Hunger and sleep. Temptations. Dayanidhi Prabhu, get him the mic as quick as you can. If it's worth repeating, I can repeat it. Give him the mic anyway. We give $100 for those statements not worth repeating. Let me see if I got one.
I was thinking about the way things are going on. I'll just say it, is that to tolerate, you may have a lot of respect for some devotee, utmost respect for some devotees, but you don't maybe agree with all their opinions on some of the politics or some of the way things are going on. So you must, tolerate someone's opinion, even though you have the utmost respect for that devotee, but you don't have the same ideas or same opinions on some things that are going on. You must tolerate that and still have the highest respect for that devotee.
Yeah, that's an inevitable situation that one must tolerate. And I mean, we see it with Arjuna. I mean, this is partly what he's tolerating when he comes into the battlefield of Kurukshetra, is that he has people who he respects. His teacher, Dronacharya, is on the other side. His grandfather's on the other side. And meanwhile, he's being asked to do his duty and fight against them and kill them and so forth. And he has the greatest respect for them, but they're on opposite sides of the political spectrum. The way the world is, topsy-turvy, and things always get moved around like that. And within an institution, there's always these currents, especially if you get into management. Then there's these very difficult situations where you have to decide this and that, and both of them seem like bad choices. But you have to choose one anyway, in order for the sake of going on and such. And yes, that requires a great deal of tolerance to be able to do that, and to be able to accommodate opposing points of view while still, having respect for the person. Once Prabhupada was talking about the different sampradayas and like different, it was specifically about the sampradayas and how he said that there are 4 Vaishnava sampradayas and they have different opinions on some things. He said, but ultimately they have the same opinion. And he said it's just like political parties. There's Republicans and Democrats, and they have very different opinions, especially nowadays. But ultimately, they're interested in the welfare of the country. They're all Americans, right, or Indians, and they want to see the welfare of the country, but they have very different ways of going about it. Like that. Who is next? Go ahead, Malini. Talking about tolerance, different things that one must tolerate.
Tolerate the urge to get up while you're chanting. That's
a big one. Yeah, I mean, if you have these desires that are running wild, it's very difficult to sit down and just concentrate and just be with the holy name, because there's constantly something saying, get back up again. Yeah.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, when I think about myself, I always find most of the times I have difficulty in tolerating my own shortcomings, which sometimes I get bogged down whether I'll improve in my spiritual life. So I think we
That's
always...
a really good one. Tolerate your own shortcomings. Because there's a way in which plowing through requires that you have to tolerate your own shortcomings and not become so discouraged that you just give up the process and just say, I'm not qualified, I can't do this anyway, and become morose and not do your duty. Do the best you can with what you have right now. Do the best you can with what other ability Krishna has given you. And you have to tolerate not being, and not comparing oneself with others is helpful in that. Not becoming envious that somebody else can do this, I can't. Prabhupada mentions this principle in the Bhagavad Gita, a purport we've read many times, when he says that if one has faith in Krishna's teachings and his instructions and tries to follow them even though he's unable to do so in the beginning, imperfectly doing it, but he doesn't resent it. He doesn't resent the fact that I can't do this yet, even though he knows it's the right thing to do, but I can't do it. He doesn't become discouraged with himself or angry at Krishna and resentful of other people because they can do it and so forth. But if he just goes on methodically doing what he can, doing what she can do, then Prabhupada said eventually that person will attain full success. So that's a good one. Yeah, how to tolerate that. Yes.
One time, a husband and wife went to His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj. They always have a conflict between the husband and wife. And then the husband asked, Maharaj, how do I tolerate the problems? And Maharaj said, the way I am tolerating you and the way Prabhupada tolerated all of us. So that's the...
Yeah. Yeah. Sundar, were you ready to go? Go ahead.
Tolerate when our expectations fall short.
When your expectations come up short?
Come up short.
So yeah, we talked about this in one class a year or two ago about managing your expectations. It's a business principle that sales companies, they try to manage people's expectations, because if they're too much, then they'll be disappointed when they come. If they're too little, then they won't come at all.
And one other point, Prabhu, there is a section about tolerance in 13th chapter, 8 to 12.
Sure.
Actually, I really liked Dayaniti Prabhu's point, which I also wanted to mention. Like opposing opinions, they are inevitable. So, in fact, the tolerance and meditation of a tolerant person would be to beforehand expect that there will be opposing opinions. And in addition to that, there will be misunderstandings. So I was just thinking that tolerance is not only passive, but rather it's very active, because it's an active principle. When there are misunderstandings and if a person is tolerant, then his perception actually rises because he waits and he, as he said, he plows through. So he can see that, the modes are acting or how. So it's a very active principle in that sense.
Could you say more about how it's active? Examples?
So, as a passive process, one would think that tolerance means, whatever is happening, you just take
You just don't do anything.
You don't do anything or take it out of destiny, even at a contemplative level. It's my destiny. But when some misunderstandings happen, as an active principle, a person who is tolerant, he actually analyzes, he actually is contemplative, and he thinks that why misunderstandings are happening, what is behind the scenes. And that can develop into more compassion and understanding of, about the misunderstanding.
And can it also be active in the sense that he tries to do something about
needful,
it?
yeah.
I was thinking about the principle that we teach for book distribution, which is sort of a universal principle, but this is that we honor objections. This is a kind of tolerance, because when people present objections, and they do, when you're trying to present something new to somebody's mind, it can go either way, accept or reject, or it can then accept and then reject, or reject and then accept. So objections come out, and instead of stonewalling them, we honor the objection first. It's a kind of tolerance that you accept that somebody has a difference of opinion. So you honor the objection, and it tends to make it neutralize it. Someone says, I really don't believe in this. As you go, I can appreciate that. Here, I can appreciate your point of view, and so here's, like, we met these Sikhs. I was with Navina Nirada. We were leaving Los Angeles after the BBT meetings, and we had books in our bag when we were walking through the LAX airport. And there were these three young Sikhs. They had turbans and everything like that. And they looked like a jolly bunch. They're having a good time there in Los Angeles. So we approached them, and I started showing them the books. I handed each one of them a different book. And one of them said, is this... He said, I don't believe in religion or anything like that. So he handed the book back. I go, okay, no problem. Here's one for people who don't believe in religion. And I gave... sort of honored his objection, and then he ended up buying it, and but I was just trying to give an example of an active way that we tolerate. Someone gives an objection, but we honor the objection, not that we necessarily agree with it, but we honor it. That, I can see you have an objection. I honor the fact that you have a difference, something different from me, and then you move on from there as a way to actually remedy the situation. Thank you. Yes, Prabhuji.
Just to add on that point, one of the lectures which I heard, if in our mind we always contemplate on the higher principle in terms of making the person devotee, and cooperatively flourish together and go back to Godhead, if that is the end objective 24/7 in mind, so whatever tolerances in terms of differences of opinions as well might be subsided, because we already know that there is a higher purpose to it. So that is one thing. Another thing which we tolerate is when our plans doesn't match Krishna's plans. So that's what we tolerate. And we say I say I'm surrendered, but sometimes I'm not surrendered. And I see my plans are different than Krishna's plans, and that is something to be tolerated in terms of, okay, Krishna, I believe you, something will go right, or things will fall in place, it's good for my spiritual life. So
two excellent points. And the first one, Devamrita Swami talked quite a bit about, that in teaching Krishna consciousness to others to whom it's a foreign concept, of course, it's not foreign to anybody, but initially it may seem that way to some people. He was talking specifically about introducing Krishna consciousness to people from the West. And he was saying that one has to have great compassion in order to tolerate all the reversals that take place. Because one invests oneself in people. You give your heart, you give your time, your energy in order to help them on the path of Krishna consciousness. And then any time they can just change their mind or to even completely change their faith and turn on you and say, I don't like this anymore, I don't like you anymore, I don't like anything anymore, and then leave. And that takes, you really have to tolerate that a lot. Parents have this experience sometimes with their children. They'll give their life and soul. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 16 years, 18 years, and then, it's happened before, hasn't it, in history, that the kid doesn't listen to you after that and considers you to be even not a well-wisher, and it's like, nah, I don't care for you. So that can happen when you're raising people in Krishna consciousness. And the second one was Krishna has a different plan than we have. And the smartest thing to do is figure out what Krishna's plan is and try to get it. This is kind of like voluntary, we say voluntary life changes. The way to be smart is to figure out the way things are going to be and then adjust your life in that way so you're in harmony with them. Yes. Harivamsha.
Actually, I would like to quote a verse here, and
please.
This is a nice verse because it's showing how people move around in the world. People come together, separate. How it's important to tolerate. This is what Narad Muni is telling to Yudhishthira Maharaj when he asks what happened to his uncle, aunt, and when Vidura.
First number?
1.13.43. 1.13.43. So this is Yatha Krido Pashkranam Samyoga Vigamav Iha Ichchaya Kriditu Syatam Tathaiva Sechchaya Nirnam. So the translation is, as a player sets up and disperses his playthings according to his own sweet will, so the supreme will of the Lord brings men together and separates them. So I was just thinking, this happens so often as, we do different stages of life, and we should tolerate it like that.
Yes, very much so. In the early days of ISV, I remember when the first devotee first came up to me and said, I got to move back to India. And I thought, actually, I think it was Veda Vit had to leave somewhere. He was doing really well. There must have been some before that, but he sticks out in my mind. And I really couldn't sleep for a long time. I was thinking, why does he got to go? Couldn't get the job, the visa to match the whole thing, whatever it was. And then he moved out to, where did he go? Out to Pittsburgh. Anyway, and then I started realizing that that was going to happen pretty frequently. And I think back to the original temple I joined in San Francisco. I was talking to my godbrother Vatsal while we were cooking for the Rath Yatra, and we were reminiscing. And I was like, remember such and such? Yeah, I remember so and so. And nobody's there anymore. In fact, the temple isn't even there anymore. It's somewhere else. Everything moves around, and you can't really keep track of people. And I heard one lecture where Prabhupada that really struck me. It's a very simple point, but it went so deep. I think it was around the time that either my father or my mother passed away. And Prabhupada said, when somebody dies who's close to you, there's only one thing you can do, and that is tolerate. And that really struck me, and I was thinking, how powerful is this toleration, this ability to tolerate when a death occurs in your family, that you just have to tolerate it. Because then over time, things change. Time and mercy can mend the heart. So, yes, Vittal, and then I want to see something more from Prabhupada's purports you have for us.
Prabhu, tolerate the urge to do something new or different.
Yeah, so the idea was just you're not getting a taste from what you're doing, so then you want to change it somehow. So So give your mind something new to do instead of just sticking to the regular program, right? Can you give me an example?
Yeah, you said it like many times we feel that the process is not working because I'm not getting the taste. So you get enamored by.
So I got to go do something else. Yeah. I need some seminar somewhere and somewhere else to fix it, right? Change the mantra. That's it must be the mantra. It's not me. I would tweak the mantra. You had a point? Yes.
So I was looking at two verses from Bhagavad Gita where Krishna is mentioning. I will just read the translation. He's saying that in this chapter 3.
What's the verse?
Chapter 3, verse 40.
340, okay.
The senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the sitting places of this lust, and which veils the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilders him. The next verse is, therefore, O Arjuna, best of the Bharatas, in the very beginning curse this great symbol of sin, that is lust, by regulating the senses, and slay this destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. How is it related to tolerate is, when you are tolerating lust, you should be very careful, because what Krishna is saying is that the moment it arises, move away from that situation. That is his advice. Never try to tolerate lust, because lust will always win.
Well, yeah, in one sense. In another sense, he's saying regulate the senses to destroy lust. And in a sense, that is a kind of toleration, because regulation means that you commit yourself to a certain way of the way you use your senses every day. And then lust comes along and says, hey, let's do that. That looks better. And you say, no, this is our program. This is regulation. You do the same thing every day. And there's a way in which, according to the Yoga Sutras, that the repositories of that lust, they gradually are divested of the reservoir of lust that's kept in them as one tolerates. It goes out. There is hope. It's not that one's indelibly stained with this lust and one can't get free from it, but as one tolerates, then the urges become smaller and less effective on us. So one has to learn to regulate the senses. So there's a kind of tolerance of lust. It means, the urge comes up, and one rises above that urge by taking shelter of the higher self. Okay, last point, and then we're going to the books. Yeah.
So in this, I have a bit of a confusion and a point to add. In Bhagavad Gita, we never find Mahaprabhu's mercies there, but Mahaprabhu's mercy comes as holy name. So as we see in Haridas Thakur as an example, that he never ran away from the prostitute which approached Haridas Thakur, but instead he kept on chanting, and he was steadfast and in terms of offenseless chanting. So that's where Mahaprabhu mercies becomes the differentiator. Is it or is it not? That's my question. Is it not the Mahaprabhu's mercy becomes the real differentiator when it comes and comes as holy name? And we stick to holy name, and these things automatically subsides because we lose taste in them. Because there is another form of lust, which is the lust which comes out of I have done something, and it's basically the self-appreciation. That is also, which is also counted as part of lust. That it's not just the sex desire, but it's the subtle sex desire that I have achieved something, I have done something. So the self-praised and self-respect, which self-praise which comes in. So is it the differentiator is Mahaprabhu's mercy as holy name, and how to approach that?
The differentiator means?
Yeah, because Haridas Thakur did not run away.
What's the question? Just say it in one sentence.
Haridas Thakur did not run away from the prostitute. He just kept on changing, and the prostitute changed her mind, and she started chanting. So that's where the differentiator. In Bhagavad Gita, we do not have Mahaprabhu's mercy.
But what's the question? Say it in one sentence.
So, is it the lust which is, shall we run away from the...
Should you run away? Or should you?
Just keep on chanting and,
Should you run away or should you keep chanting?
yeah, like Haridas.
It depends. If you're a Haridas Thakur, you stay. I mean, we shouldn't become, think that I can overcome this. In fact, Prabhupada mentions in one place in the Srimad Bhagavatam purports, he said that if one thinks that, I can associate freely with attractive women and I won't be affected, then one will fall down. There's a way in which devotees go out to teach Krishna consciousness to people all the time, and they have to interact in so many different ways. We have to be a clear judge we have to be able to clearly judge about how to interact with the world and not become affected. And if there's situations that we know will be dangerous for us, and we know we can't handle, we should avoid them and just take ourselves out of physical proximity of those situations. And if we have a duty to do, like of course the examples Hanuman, when he was in Lanka, he was going through the palace looking for Sita, and he saw so many voluptuous women there in Ravana's palace. But his mind was fixed on finding Sita for Ram, so he wasn't affected by that. And we must fortify ourselves regularly every day, and we should always have the attitude that I can't take liberties and not think that I'm liberated and therefore I can do this or that. But if one's doing one's duty in certain situations in teaching Krishna consciousness and so forth, one continues to do one's duty properly, then one may have some kind of an effect like Haridas Thakur had. Even though the people may not have the right motivation or something like that, they can be also affected. Anyway, the point is one should be careful. Should be very careful. And no one should think I'm Haridas Thakur, I'm on that level. This is something that the acharyas say frequently. As soon as we do that, then we're in a really dangerous situation.
Thank you, Madam.
What else do we have in Prabhupada's purport?
In the Bhagavad Gita, 13th chapter, 8 to 12, verse number 8 to 12, there's a word Chanti. Chanti is translated into tolerance, and in the 4th paragraph, Prabhupada gave the purport.
Where in the purport?
In the 4th paragraph.
4th paragraph. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So, tolerance means that one should be practiced to bear insults and dishonor from others. I'll just read that again. Tolerance means that one should be practiced to bear insult and dishonor from others. Has anybody practiced that? Have you practiced bearing insult from others? Nilesh? Anything? Yes.
You have to do that at work,
You do it at work.
Work, both with the boss as well as with the customer. Angry customer you have to tolerate.
So how do you do that?
Boss. Just keep quiet.
Okay, just keep quiet. Yeah. Yes. Tolerance means that one should be practiced to bear insult and dishonor from others. Okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, just a quick thing. Last year, this incident happened where I was driving in Los Angeles, and it wasn't entirely my fault, but this guy who came, and he started driving parallelly, and he just kept on lashing. He just kept on verbally abusing me with all kinds of hand gesture and all that.
From another car?
From another car.
Okay.
And at that point, I'll be the first one to confess that earlier I have also responded in kind. But somehow this time, obviously, this was last year, I had dropped my daughter, I had my tilak on, and somehow I just reflected on it. Like, I have my tilak on, I thought of you, and you had given talk on the road rage, and somehow all those things thankfully came to my mind on the same time. And I didn't say anything, I just tolerate, and I tried explaining it to him, but it was not possible. So I just looked at it and I asked him to go away. Now, some miraculous thing happened afterwards, that the very next 2 or 3 exits later, which I pulled over to go to my place, I saw him, he had stopped right outside the entrance of where I was living. Now, that kind of brought a little concern on me. Is this guy know me? I have to get down and confront him because I'm not here all the time. So I was thinking of my family. So I pulled over and I got out and I kind of approached him a little bit intimidatingly so that he would be afraid. And I walked up hurriedly or something because I was thinking of my family at that time. And he pulled over for some reason because I thought he bumped his car or something, whatever reason. But he was also surprised to see me, that I have pulled over and what am I going to do to him. And so when I approached him, I explained him very properly what had happened, why I had to suddenly brake, because there was a light and he had not seen it. And then he told me that how the day has been entirely rough on him. He broke with his blah, 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 and then something happened and all. And then he thanked me for behaving the way I did. And
yay! Bravo!
This was late last year, and when I came home later in the evening, I narrated this to my wife, and I actually told her and thought about the class you gave on the road rage, that you never know what that other person is going through. And but anyway, thank you for your instruction.
It's a really good point, and it's a good place to test out your. Stephen Covey gives this example in his book, The 7 Secrets of Highly Effective People, that he's on a train, and this man gets on with his 2 or 3 kids. I can't remember how many he had, but they were unruly, 3 kids, and they were unruly. And the man was gazing off into space, not doing anything to bring them to the public, the way they should act in public. And Stephen Covey said he became disturbed by this. It just seems like he should do something. So he leaned over to the man and he said, your kids are disturbing a lot of people. Could you please do something to control them? And the man came out of his trance-like state and he said, I'm really sorry. We just came from the hospital. Their mother just died. And then immediately, and he said, I'm just lost in thought and sorrow, and they don't know how to react and so forth. And then Stephen Covey said that he immediately had a different perception of the whole situation. And this is one way of tolerating also, is to understand that people are reacting or treating us in a certain way because of what's coming from them. It's nothing about us, it's something that's in their heart. I have a mantra I used to use frequently on the road if there was some incident. I just immediately say, I forgive you. And not like they could hear it or anything like that, but just, I forgive you, I forgive you, I forgive you, I forgive you. And I remember driving with some people, and they were about to start screaming at the person, or they were driving, and I would just say, we forgive you. And then, what are you talking about? I'm not forgiving them. Just, you see what he did? It's like, we forgive you. And it's just such a good mantra, just say, forgive you. And another one is, it's my fault, sorry. And just let it go really quick. Just get in the habit. Like Prabhupada says right here. He says, tolerance means one should be practiced to bear insult and dishonor from others. So you got to practice it and be ready for that. So the next sentence, he says, if one is engaged in the advancement of spiritual knowledge, there will be so many insults and much dishonor from others. This is expected because material nature is so constituted. Even a boy like Prahlad, who was only 5 years old, was engaged in the cultivation of spiritual knowledge, was endangered when his father became antagonistic to his devotion. The father tried to kill him in so many ways, but Prahlad tolerated him. So there may be many impediments to making advancement in spiritual knowledge, but we should be tolerant and continue our progress with determination. It's the first quality mentioned by Lord Kapila Deva of what a sadhu is, titikshava. Titikshava karunika surida sarvadehinam. So the first thing is that you'll notice in somebody who's advanced spiritually is tolerance. And when you start, when one tolerates, then one notices the intolerance in others. For instance, have you ever noticed you're getting on an airplane or something like that, and really all you can do is just wait till the plane's ready. Get on the plane and just go. But you notice all the time people getting really agitated and screaming at the gate agent like they haven't been screamed at 3 times a day for the last 20 years, as long as they've been there. And what good is that going to do? And Prabhupada mentions this tolerance of in the in the context of travel, when he said a person gets on the train and there's a dispute over who gets what seat. And Prabhupada said, it's only a 3-hour train ride. What's the big deal? Just stand up. Why get into a big thing? And then he said, somebody who's a devotee, they realize this lifetime, it's over in 3 hours. There's a few stops and we're out. So why get all upset about certain things that happened, reversals of fortune, and things like that we can't do anything about, and therefore one goes on tolerating. The other benefit of tolerating is that you don't commit yourself to a particular position, and you just wait and let the situation work itself out, and it always does, to one degree or another, because time changes everything. No one can stay in one position or another. Yes?
Prabhu, this definitely explains a higher principle. It's my realization. The most important thing, there has to be a rule and regulation, a higher principle. For example, it might be a joke, but in America, nobody honks unless they make some mistake. In India, everybody honks too much.
That's how you get your driver's license.
Driver's license, right? So that means if there is a rule which has been framed, that helps. So that means we should have that higher principle to tolerate. It's been framed, we don't follow it. That's why people honk too much in our lives.
You should follow the rules so you don't disturb others, you mean?
No, basically, when we have the higher principle, then we automatically tolerate.
I see. If you have the higher principle, yes, that helps. Just on a side note, there was my friend Guru Kripa told me once that if he became the king of India, he would immediately ban honking. No more honking. Yes.
Another higher principle what we can focus on is that everyone is actually part and parcel of Krishna. One of the Prabhupada's last words were, whatever happening is happening with the will of Krishna. This consciousness is Krishna consciousness. So practically these were one of few last words which Prabhupada actually gave us. So if we understand that everyone is actually part and parcel of Krishna, and somehow is actually Krishna's arrangement, I have been put in this situation. So we will definitely, it's not even then it becomes tolerance, it becomes a rejoice. Like Kunti Maharani says that, I'm really happy in that situation. So if we get on to that kind of mood where we can, more and more understand that everyone is actually part and parcel of Krishna, and there is no point in envying anyone or, if somebody is bad at me and I'm tolerating, it's actually Krishna is doing everything. So if
Sure. Now, there's a story in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Yes, Dilip Bhai.
When you're in customer service, I am, but you get installed, people are always asking this question. Just last night, a guest arrives, checks in, comes back with a microwave dinner. And he knows that we have a microwave. So he asked me, can we use your microwave? I said, no, because it has meat. I'm a vegetarian. Then he said, however, we have another microwave in another room that you can use. He said, do you have something against me being not vegetarian? I said, do you have anything against me then? So we went into the room to warm his dinner up in another room, it's a microwave. And as we was warming it up, he noticed in the next room, he noticed the Bhagavad Gita books. And he said, what is these books? I said, there's one in your drawer when you go in your room. and you'll see that, and we distribute those in the motel rooms. He says, yes, okay. So in the morning, he comes back. He said, can I take this book? I said, when you finish reading this book, you'll become a vegetarian.
Practical, and also very nice to hear. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Ramachandra Puri was the godbrother of Mahaprabhu's guru. And he had offended, Ramachandra Puri had offended his spiritual master and had been rejected by him. And he became a great fault finder. And when he came to visit Mahaprabhu in Puri, he found fault. Although there was no fault in Mahaprabhu at all, he looked for fault. In fact, one of the things he would do, he would bring opulent prasadam to the Vaishnavas and make them eat more and more, and then he would say, I heard that you guys eat too much. And he was trying to find fault in Mahaprabhu, but he couldn't, till one day he saw some ants walking through the room. And India, ants wander here, there, and everywhere. But he took it as a stimulus to then criticize Mahaprabhu and says, aha, somebody's been eating sweets here. And sannyasi's not supposed to eat sweets, but obviously there's ants here, you've been eating sweets. And then he also criticized Mahaprabhu for eating too much. And so Mahaprabhu immediately cut his quota in half. Every day he would take half of what he was taking before. And all the devotees became very morose, and they became angry at Ramachandra Puri. But Mahaprabhu said, what is his fault? He's simply pointing out that I'm eating too much. And all the way through, Mahaprabhu was tolerating this behavior of this Ramachandra Puri, probably because out of etiquette, he was the godbrother of his spiritual master, so he didn't want to say anything. And also, it's mentioned in that section, a verse by Kaviraj Goswami, that one should neither praise or blame anyone because one should see that the universe is working in a uniform way. Going to your point, that everything is going on, it's all being arranged by Krishna through the material nature, and it's balanced out in a perfect way anyway, so what are you going to complain about? Of course, then it says that of the two, one should not criticize, but it's okay to praise. But Ramachandra Puri took it the opposite way. In any case, the example is there of Mahaprabhu. Finally, Ramachandra Puri went away and all the devotees celebrated. But you can see from his example that he tolerated such things. Interpersonal conflict is going to be there. There's another story at Rath Yatra. You think that there won't be conflict between devotees, but Srivas Pandit is a pure devotee. He was standing watching Chaitanya Mahaprabhu dance in the Rath Yatra. And behind him was standing Maharaj Prataparudra, and who couldn't then see the dancing of Mahaprabhu. So Harishchandra was the servant of Prataparudra Maharaj, and he noticed the situation, so he started touching and pushing Srivas Pandit to get his attention, to get him to move, so that the king could see the dancing. And Srivas Pandit, absorbed in the dancing, just felt somebody was touching and pushing him, so he finally turned around and smacked him. And Harishchandra was about to retaliate and say something, and Prataparudra Maharaj interjected and he said, I am not so fortunate. I have not been slapped by a pure devotee. And it neutralized the situation. And so first thing is about expectations. Who brought up the expectations part? Manage the expectations. Don't expect that there won't be these kinds of interactions between devotees, even pure devotees. And next, take it to higher ground. This is the way to tolerate the higher principle. See the higher principle and realize that this is a great fortune. I've just been slapped by a pure devotee, and leave it at that. And you come out on the higher side and become purified in the process. So this is a practice. Tolerance is a practice, and it is the foremost of practices in spiritual life. There are a lot of things that you can fake. You can say, I saw Krishna dancing. You can say, I'm so in love with Krishna. You can say that, so many things. But to actually tolerate on a day-to-day basis and go on doing your duty, to tolerate all the injustices that are apparently coming to you from others, from material nature, from your own body and mind and so forth, that you cannot fake. That you have to practice and you have to get good at. And without doing that, forget about moving forward in spiritual life and crying and seeing Krishna and your hair standing on end. First do this. This is the first step. Yes?
So you say you practice. So you say that we need to practice tolerance, and how do you do that? Sometimes it's so difficult when you're going through some tough times in life, or somebody close to you is going through tough times in life. It can be very difficult, even with all the spirituality, and it's even if you're a very strong person, it can be. How do you practice it? I mean, I'm trying to do that, but
You're trying to practice it?
It's difficult. It can go on for years.
Yeah.
So.
It's definitely doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy that you do it. How do you practice tolerance? Well, first of all, that you decide that it's worth doing. First, you look at the benefits of what do I get from practicing tolerance. That's a good place to start, to fortify yourself, because then when situations come to you unsought, and they will come out of nowhere, that's the time when it's really easy to lose your cool and give up your practice of tolerance. Wasn't expecting that. That's too much. That's the last one. No one told me that was coming. I could tolerate this, but that, I don't deserve that. That's the point, So be ready. And in the Shikshastakam prayers, our translation of this Trinadapi Sunichena, one should be as humble as the grass, as tolerant as a tree, and ready to offer all respects to others. I think it was Mukunlal Prabhu once, the father of our beloved Vanamali, who comes here, said that what does that mean, to be ready to tolerate? It means you have to prepare yourself ahead of time and know that things are going to come to you unsought, that you didn't want, that you weren't expecting. So first of all, know that they'll come, because then you're in a ready state that you're going to tolerate these things. And then many of the things that we're saying here, also, you have to have a higher principle. You have to have a clear vision why you're tolerating, for a higher cause. That Krishna gives this instruction in the Bhagavad Gita, somebody who tolerates is very dear to me. In the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, he's talking about how somebody who doesn't react all the time to all these things that come becomes dear to me, that learns to tolerate. So if one's thinking, this will please Krishna, if I'm tolerant, there may be less lofty goals as well. Just like, if I don't tolerate, I'll make the situation worse. That could be a motivation also. Just the wisdom that by reacting to everything that comes up and not tolerating it, then it actually exacerbates the situation and it makes it worse. But if you stay calm and just learn to accept what's coming, and to know that you have to also philosophically understand that this is something temporary that's coming and going. It's not going to last forever. All things must pass. All things must pass away.
Thank you.
You can remember that song. It's a good song. Yes, last point. Then we got Kirtan.
The Saint Purandarasa's songs, one of the I heard is the same thing how Trunadapi Surichena, he also says how the sandalwood, it's not just cutting the tree, you take the sandalwood and even you make that squeeze and then rub it into the, and then find what is the outcome, you get an aroma, nice aroma. So in that way, if you tolerate, you'll at least one day, you'll feel the flavor of Krishna consciousness.
So how does that relate to the tree and the cutting? And
basically, they tolerate. How do you tolerate, right?
Yeah.
The tree is tolerating.
Yeah.
So, but the sandalwood, what it does is, in spite of you doing so much problems for the tree, and you are cutting the sandalwood and even rubbing it, so what it says is, it finally gives us the flavor.
So if the person tolerates,
yeah,
then they're
how
like
much
sandalwood,
tolerate you can,
and the
right?
good aroma, like the good qualities,
Yeah.
become apparent.
Right.
That's nice. Who just checked in on the phone? I heard somebody come off mute. Who dat?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, this is Pratibha.
Oh yes, Pratibha, go ahead.
Dhanwad Pranam Maharaj. I had recently read your bhakti note which said that with tolerance you can strengthen your muscle of tolerance like any other muscle of your body or memory muscle like that. And recently I kind of felt an attack on my sadhana, but I tolerated it. Something in me made me, handle it very nicely, and I tolerated it. And I felt really good after that. And sure enough, after 2 days, I read your email on Bhakti Note with tolerance as the topic, and it gave me so much strength, and it kind of imbibed in me the importance of tolerance. So that's what I wanted to share.
That's a nice point, and it just reminds me of what I was thinking when I wrote that piece, is that, Anita, this might be, that, there's a way in which we start with small things. Tolerate the things you can tolerate now, and then you'll get better at it. It's just like developing a muscle. If you start with a light weight and do what you can, then the muscle tissue breaks down a little bit, and then it grows stronger, and then you can do a little bit more. So start with things that you can tolerate now, and then gradually you'll be able to tolerate the larger things. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Radhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Gaur Premanande. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming tonight. Now we're going to have an Artik ceremony where we get to stand up and dance and sing the holy names and watch the Lord accept so many different articles offered. So we'll put away all the asanas and we can stand up before the deities. Thank you very much.